Okay, so morning everyone. Can you hear me clearly? Let me make sure I can see you clearly. Right, I'm going to spend the next 50 or so minutes in your company basically having a discussion or continuing a discussion about something I think is not just one of my obsessions, but I think is part of a set of issues which will be central to the development of secular thought over the next couple of decades. And that is, on one hand, the history of black free thought, of black atheism, agnosticism, doubt, and the place for black and non-white free thinkers in the mainstream secular movements, plural. So it's a lot to try and crunch into. I'm going to try and give myself 30 or so minutes, because I'd like to have a long Q&A. I'm not sure that will happen, but when I get to 30 minutes, if everyone could collectively just give me the timeout sign, because as you can imagine, I'm very enthusiastic about these subjects, and I get into circular breathing, and I can just talk. Okay, so it always strikes me as being really strange, the degree to which black free thought has taken the rear seat, has taken, it's been put on the back burner in terms of black political and cultural development. And it shocks me, really, the position that's given to the religious, to the Christian in particular. I'll be focusing about 80% of my delivery on Christians. This is all the stranger when you look in depth at how these movements developed, who was involved with them. I'm particularly talking about the abolition movement, the movements for independence throughout the British Empire in particular, and of course the civil rights movement in America. How is it that more people don't know about A. Philip Randolph? A. Philip Randolph, who was the co-organizer of Martin Luther King's 1963 March on Washington. In fact, he was the larger, more active organizer. But he was also very much an active, out-and-out non-believer, famous for upsetting the black bourgeoisie, amongst others, for insisting on having his political meetings on Sundays, where they would discuss earthly matters rather than spiritual. But yeah, he's completely out of the picture, as is Robert Wedderburn, one of the great, I would say the greatest, even the craziest, I have to be honest, of the British radicals of the early 1800s. Robert Wedderburn, that Jamaican firebrand who was actively using religion against itself. If I have enough time, I might try and shoehorn some of his ideas and fantasies into this presentation. But before I jump off the deep end, I'd just like to share a personal moment with you, and that is to take you back to 2015. 17th of June, Charleston, South Carolina, at the African Methodist Episcopal Church there, where a Bible study meeting was being held. This church was actually the first institutionalized black congregation in the United States. It dated back to 1816. It was known generally as the Mother Church. And this evening in June, there are a number of black elders who are having a Bible study, into which strolled, I'm sure you'll remember, one Dylan Roof. Dylan Roof, who during the proceedings would brandish an automatic weapon and murder nine of the people in the space. I was shocked about that for a number of reasons, but a perverse urge in me prompted me to look at the interior, find images of the interior of this church. And it's quite bland, with the exception of two panels, which you cannot miss, and they're flanking the altar. And on the left-hand panel is, you can see Christ on the cross, the nailed Nazarene, surrounded by adorers. And on the right-hand side, you can see the risen Christ, again, flanked by adorers, surrounded by adorers. Both the adorers and Christ are white, unmistakably Caucasian. And as a long-time unbeliever, that still managed to shock me. The whole setup was absurd, almost comical, perfectly comical, imagining these black worshippers welcoming in their murderer, the white murderer whose possible last vision before he opened fire was that of Christ, who also was represented, as a Caucasian. It's just perfectly absurd, and that just put me into a bit of a tailspin for a while. Coming out of it, I realized that one way of sort of balancing my temper would be to embed myself even more closely and more deeply into the history of black free thought and black non-belief, because it's not a cliche to say, I wish it was, it's not a cliche to say that blackness or people of African origin are almost synonymous with worship, with communities of faith, and the voices of unbelievers are pushed very, very much to the side, which is ridiculous given the long and vigorous traditions of outright irreverence to all things, including the Gospels and or magic books, which are prevalent in our communities. When you look back at the history, particularly of political movements, you can see, I think, some of the best examples of black free thought. Look, for example, at the history of abolition in North America and the literature which was part of that. From the very beginning, you've got atheists, you've got unbelievers like William Wells Brown. In 1853, he writes Clotel, believed to be the first novel written by an African American. And of course, it's a story of plantation degeneracy. And at the heart of it, running through it like a thread, is that constant questioning of the role of the church. What is its function in plantation societies and throughout higher structures of white supremacy? But it wasn't just in fiction, it's also in some of the slave narratives. I was trying to find another word, another expression. Some of the slave narratives, you see the same sentiments, top, front, and center, even when they are couched necessarily, because you have to remember who was publishing these products, even when they are couched in terms of Christian belief, the argument is still there. In Peter Randolph's, what did you write? Yeah, so Sketches of Slave Life, which comes out in 1855, even though he's presenting himself in the preface as a Christian, it's very clear that his voice is that of an aggrieved non-believer. He's getting his revenge in his autobiography, as is Austin Stewart as well in 1859. And these are the two of the seminal texts, African-American abolitionist texts. Excuse me. When you come to these islands and look back, even before the 1850s, you can go back to the 1740s, 1770s, 80s, 1790s, early 18s and 18 teens, you see that same dynamic. There's that playoff between black professing Christians, such as Alauda Equiano, who is the highest profile of the black abolitionists in this country. Alauda Equiano, who is, again, presenting this very performative style of Christianity, which proclaims that, yes, we are all one flesh in the body of Christ. Yea, though my skin is black, my heart is white from being washed in patati patata. You know where I'm going with that. And I struggle with Equiano because on every other page, he is giving thanks and praise. He is finding a new church, finding a new congregation, making new Christian friends, and it goes on. However, it can't be denied that he was a major element in the abolitionist movement in this country, just being blackface, bearing witness to the horrors of slavery. On the other hand, you have Robert Wedderburn, who I mentioned earlier, an extraordinary gentleman. I could bore anyone to tears on him. Here is someone of mixed background whose father was a plantation owner, his mother was enslaved, whose life has been transformed by one event, and that event is to have witnessed his grandmother being stripped to the waist and pinned to the ground and flogged almost to death for the supposed crime of casting a spell working obeah on a European's ship, which then sank in Kingston Harbour. And of course, this fostered, engendered in him lifelong hatred of slavery. His book, or his long pamphlet, The Horrors of Slavery, is a classic read. It engenders in him a horror of slavery as well as a horror of organized religion. And unusually, I'd almost say uniquely, he is quite public about his disgust. He settles in London. He starts to publish all sorts of periodicals and pamphlets and scurrilous tracts with titles like A Shove for Fat-Bottomed Parsons. Another was High-Heeled Shoes for Dwarves in Holiness, just so there would be no mistake where he's coming from. But most interestingly, he was organizing as well. Of course, most actively in the 18 teens, and he was part of these quite grubby but very inspired groupuscules in Regency London who were trying to push for a general uprising against the Six Acts, etc., etc. It's a very, very interesting guy who produced what I think was some of his finest writing in his publication called The Axe Laid to the Root, which did exactly what it said on the tin. There were no holds barred. He was writing with the express intention that his words would travel across the Atlantic and would reach and inspire enslaved communities in the Caribbean to rise up. Because as he said, or as he warned the planters, he warned them to prepare your hounds and get ready your shackles, because the fires which have started in Santo Domingo in Haiti, the Haitian Revolution, are coming your way. In order to spread these very, very powerful opinions, he realized that he needed to organize. Of course, he's in the period of the Six Acts, which control which gatherings can be held, the subject matter, how many people can gather. His solution was to become ordained as a Unitarian minister. He bought a license to be a Unitarian minister. Why not? And this entitled him to have a space, which was a horrible shed, upper shed, above some stables just off Berwick Street Market. Anyway, in this space, he holds what he calls sermons, which were delivered by an untutored Negro, actually an untutored West Indian himself. And they're basically talking politics, but under the guise of religious worship. We know a lot about this because the Home Office sent spies and turncoats and andiques and backstabbers into the congregations. And if anyone's really interested in this, please see me later, because there is so much material about him and his works and his writings which have yet to surface. Long story short, at one stage he asks the congregation, is it right for the enslaved on the plantations to rise up and kill their masters? With a voice they say yes. Wedderburn, being not entirely sane, pushes the point, asking the audience, isn't it therefore also right for the poor of England, of Britain, to rise up and kill the Prince Regent? And of course they're going to say yes, and of course he's going to go to jail. But I could talk about him forever, but he's a very useful example, a demonstration of something else which is happening during this period, which has been described by the African-American historian Julius Scott as the common wind. And the common wind is the name he gives to the networks of black thinkers, black writers, and black radicals, which allow the dissemination of abolitionist ideas, of black political philosophies, the beginnings of black nationalism, all of these things which are happening throughout the 1800s, which are fueled largely by a very mobile class, a very mobile black class, and that is, of course, seamen, seafarers, and mariners, of whom there is a superabundance in the Atlantic world. It's absolutely fascinating, this idea, which he substantiates, I think, well, to my satisfaction, that there's this combination of physical mobility, social mobility, and attachment, connection to global themes, which allows for this explosion of black thought during this period. And of course, the presence of black unbelievers amongst them. Fantastic read, highly recommend it. But again, the picture of, or the image of the black person who is enslaved and who is looking for freedom is often, excuse me, I have horrible hay fever. It's often the image which you'll find on a lot of the abolitionists' medals of the black man or woman, on one knee, à genoux, hands clasped, looking up or out to either God or some external, possibly white superior, out of the image, looking for mercy and freedom. And it constantly overlooks, people who are central to the abolitionist narrative, as Frederick Douglass, who wrote, I prayed for freedom for 20 years, but received no answer till I prayed with my legs. And this was a gentleman who was very, very active in abolitionist circles and central to spreading news about the horrors of American slavery. Right, I need to really rush. What you find in the 20th century, however, is a new breed of black freethinkers. And these are people who, to a fairly large degree, connect themselves to socialist ideas or directly with the Communist Party. Many of them come out of the Harlem Renaissance, which was a little crucible of black atheist thought. These are people who have been radicalized, particularly after 1919, the summer of blood, the summer of riots. These are people who are reading more widely, traveling more widely. Many of them had origins outside the United States, like Nella Larson, whose mother was Danish, Hubert Harrison, who came from the Caribbean. To a smaller degree, try and shoehorn Marcus Garvey into that assembly, although he had his own personal egomaniacal religious notions, but he was definitely not a man of God. And you have writers like, for example, Langston Hughes, who I will get back to, who I think I'll close these proceedings with, who, again, was a great world traveller. He was also a fellow traveller, and he was a known socialist, and I think he was bisexual as well, I'm not sure. But he was very, very active in presenting a different face of not just anti-religiosity, but a different face to black political activity as well. My favorite person from this period, again, we're staying in North America, because, yes, this is a global story. My favorite person from that set is Zora Neale Hurston. Her most widely read book is Their Eyes Were Watching God. Absolutely fascinating person. I could bore again. But I would actually equate or put Zora Neale Hurston side by side with Robert Ingersoll as one of the great unbelievers, inasmuch as it's my contention, in fact I know, that there could be a beautiful golden treasury of black humanist, black secular thought just taken from her writings and her utterances, to which end I'm just building up to share with you a couple of these. She writes she's talking directly about religion here, and she writes, excuse me, "It seems to me to be true that heavens are placed in the sky because it is unreachable. The unreachable, and therefore the unknowable, always seems divine, hence religion. People need religion because the great masses fear life and its consequences. Its responsibilities weigh heavy. Feeling a weakness in the face of great forces, men seek an alliance with omnipotence to bolster up their feeling of weakness, even though the omnipotence they rely upon is a creature of their own minds. It gives them a feeling of security. Strong, self-determining men are notorious for their lack of reverence." She goes on. It's very interesting when she writes about religion, she writes about her own experiences with it as a black person. She writes about the draw, the lure of community, the sense of power and connection that she feels in these hyperventilated activities. And I won't spoil it too much, but I will just say that, yeah, she is one of the most consistently moving and passionate of the black humanists of this period. She was unrelenting and open. I'll just close this part by reading briefly from another piece from her writing on religion specifically. She writes, and this is looking at her own passing, her own death, considering it, she says, "The springing of the yellow line of morning out of the misty deep of dawn is glory enough for me. I know that nothing is destructible. Things merely change forms. When the consciousness as we know as life ceases, I know that I shall still be a part and parcel of the world. I was a part before the sun rolled into shape and burst forth in the glory of change. I was when the earth was hurled out from its fiery rim. I shall return with the earth to the sun and still exist in substance when the sun has lost its fire and disintegrated in infinity to perhaps become a part of the whirling rubble of space. Why fear? The stuff of my being is matter, ever-changing, ever-moving, but never lost." She goes on, and it's a very sort of secular reverie, I think, coming from the 1920s and 30s. There was a lot of this happening, but it's all happening in a very closeted manner, because throughout there was that sidelining, and it's a continual sidelining of black, not even atheist, even radical thought, because there's incredible comfort and security in the church. I mean, on a personal level, I was brought up in the Church of God in Christ. My mother was the truest believer I have ever met. I mean, even though she could perform mental arithmetic in 4 figures in sterling, she could, no, she could. She is an extraordinary intellect, but present a cross to her and suddenly she'd be flatlining. But she was a true believer. My father, I class as a performative Christian. He knew the benefits that would accrue to him as a member of the black community in Bedford, to be seen at Alexandra Road every Sunday. Everyone is seen in their finery. People can connect. There is sense to it. My dad actually asked my brother and I the choice at the age of 13, do you want to continue with this? Which was basically his way of saying, you know, kids, you need to get out now. and of course, you know, I said, yes, Dad, before he could change his mind. I said, no, we don't want to continue, of course not. And just by way of personalizing this reality of community, and, you know, imagine growing up in the communities which Zora knew, Hurston knew, and even those that I knew, being in a small black community in the South Midlands in the 60s and 70s. Church was a place of familiarity and strength, no matter how false. The feeling was real. We're also forgetting the fact that there has been a long history of African humanism, and there still is to this day. There's the famous ongoing, never-ending discussions about Nelson Mandela, who mercifully didn't ever in his speeches give thanks and praise to any phantoms or higher powers. But on a more down-to-earth level, I think right now we're witnessing a huge explosion in black unbelief, public unbelief, from people such as Sean Kuti, hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, the son of Fela Kuti, who is a very loud and proud unbeliever, as is Benga Adjoyin, who is probably one of the bravest and funniest young people I have ever seen. This is an individual who's living in Nigeria, and off his own bat, he just goes around that vast country from north to south, east to west, calling out all religious people. I mean, he takes no prisoners, whether they're juju men, whether they're Christians, whether they are imams. He's just out to scalp everybody, and he's doing this by himself. And he's got this huge offer of money for anyone who can prove miracles. He's also got a YouTube channel, which is absolutely hilarious, as he defrocks all of these frauds and mocks openly all of these pastors. Now, I'm mentioning this because I believe the wave of the future, well, the wave of now, is with this enhanced space which digital technology allows us. The internet, where we can meet and exchange opinions, and where individuals will be allowed to be themselves in ways which can't be done in many communities. I mean, look at the ongoing, what's been over a year, 2 months, that Mubarak Bala has been in jail. There are some very, very heavy penalties to be paid for publicly professing non-belief. There are some very serious issues. Right, I'm over my time already. There are some very serious issues connected with faith and communities of color, on which I'm going to just close up by way of opening to larger discussion. Very serious issues connected to faith and people of color, which brings us to my second point, which is the radiant lack of tangible, or I will say visible participation of non-white people in humanist assemblies. And the question is not just why is that, which I'm going to leave for the Q&A, but also the perils of that position, because we are heading into a time, actually we are already in a time when the front lines between belief and unbelief, state and church, reason and faith, the front lines are, in the terms of these islands, largely being played out amongst visible minority populations on issues such as apostasy, school syllabuses, gay rights, forced marriages. All of these things are challenges which cannot be met. I'm putting this out for discussion. Can they be met by groups, organized, well-meaning groups, who are uniformly, on first glance, of one ethnic background? And not just of one ethnic background, but an ethnic background which has always been seen as an oppressor. So, I've gone over my half hour, but I'm just going to leave you on that and open for any questions. Thank you. No, I've got water. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating as ever. Does anybody immediately have any questions? Oh, yeah. Loads. Okay, we have got some roving mics, so do wait for the mic to come to you so everybody can hear. So hopefully this can be a really rich discussion. Shall we start with the lady in the second row here? Oh.
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, many thanks. It's the first time I've had the opportunity to reflect on and listen to the content that you've delivered today. So thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to ask, I'm going to roll two questions into one so I don't just deprive others of an opportunity to ask a question. The first one is an affirmation of what you've said. There are a lot of current day black people like me, who are actually closeted humanists, and they're afraid of the consequences of not being Christians, because they're aware of the benefits of being a Christian, like, putting food on the table to feed your children, like being respected when you go to work. Those are the reasons why some people remain closeted. The other thing to say that a lot of other people are performative, that they're rolling it out, like I did for many years, because, again, of the benefits. So that's a comment. And the question now is, I just wanted to hear your views on James Baldwin. You talked about all so I won't say any more because I'm sure you know who he is, and you'll have a comment on that. So let me leave it at that and give other people a chance.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'll I'll just agree with the first part, with your first statements on that sense of, and it's very real, although it's great fun to mock, but it's very, very real, this sense of exclusion from various groups or general company. But it is also true that holding positions of disbelief is just more of a thing nowadays, and certainly disparaging, particularly Christianity, is sort of moving towards the mainstream in some places, but there's still far too much attention given to faith. In terms of James Baldwin, the African-American author, Another Country, Go Tell It on the Mountain, who moved to France for his greatest success and peace of mind. He was also a complete out-and-out atheist, as well as being an out-and-out homosexual. So he had, 3 strikes against him, 2 of which put him firmly out of public view in the United States. And only very recently, his profile has risen to any degree, or to a significant degree. But even though he was very active in the civil rights movement, he actually left what was by that time a comparatively comfortable life in France to go back to the United States in, '63 to help with the civil rights movement. But he was still sidelined very much because of that double bind that he was always in, being both black and openly homosexual.
So there was another question
In the last couple of weeks, Uganda has introduced the death penalty on gay and transgendered people. Do you know why Uganda is so extreme?
The question, extreme in comparison to whom and to what? I would believe, I mean, I'm being facetious, but I would state that the sentiments which have been crunched into law in Uganda would be comparatively mainstream in large parts of the planet, particularly in many African countries and communities. Sorry, I missed the other part of your question.
To understand why Uganda is so extreme. It's
why?
only been introduced in the last 2 weeks.
Why it's so extreme is it's a conflation of quite a few horrible things. On one hand, there is the reflex which will make something like transgenderism or homosexuality something of the West, something that the white man has brought. Forgetting, of course, that it was laws against homosexuality which were introduced in Uganda, if I've got it right, in 1902, due to the prevalence of those acts amongst the Buganda people, who had all sorts of rights of adolescence, which I'm not going to go into. But it was a part of the life of the people of the largest ethnic group in the country at the time. So it's a matter of forgetting some of the history of the country, as well as overdosing on Christianity, or using Christianity as a weapon, really, is what it is, given that that is the largest faith group there. So the reason is because it's a mess.
Thank you.
I think we had also a question here in the front row, and then I feel like I'm really favouring this side because I'm looking at it. So if we've got any questions to come to after that, over to this side, that would be great.
Hi, Roshan Kasi, and I'm Marxist, atheist, humanist, and thank you very much for the informative presentation. My question is referring to the Muslim scholars, Islamic scholars. Africa is the battlefield between Islam and Christianity. I would like to know your opinion on how to fight these two evils.
Ooh. And next week. Well, there's a global battlefield for sure between those two camps. But yes, you can say it's in sharper focus in Africa. With particularly radical Islam in the North and West Africa taking a stronger hold. Nigeria is in absolute turmoil, unreported mayhem going on in the north of that country. How is it resolved? Through reason. There's no other way to do it unless you have armed squads of secular people marching as to war. I mean, how else is it going to happen apart from popularizing these ideas by supporting people like Mubarak Bala openly and Benga Adwoyin? These are young people. There's a lot of energy coming up from the young who, again, they're entering that zone of not just radicalization, but inevitably, I'm speaking about the young here, will trigger a movement away from faith. Many of these people are socially mobile, they have some social status, they are very well read, and they are part of networks which are, I'm trying not to say middle class, but that's what they are. And it's by basically supporting younger people from that section of African societies, people who have, who nurse their doubts and will share their doubts, which will be the strongest wall against all of these armed believers. Beyond that.
Okay, so we're going to head right to the back. So whoever's got a microphone is going to have to run. So we had a very keen hand wave from at the back, and then I think if we take a second one from over here as well after. Oh,
I didn't want to jump in.
Oh no, there's going to be fisticuffs. Okay, we'll go to the left at the back there first, and then we'll do currently holding the microphone first, and then we'll do to the back. Thank you.
I'm far too polite, aren't I? I was thinking from my sort of limited perspective in social work in London and working with sort of families from different backgrounds, and how, again, from my own sort of single perspective, black families, particularly working class families, were treated almost perhaps unknowingly less than white families and middle class families. And thinking about Tony Sewell's report into sort of how Britain absolutely doesn't have a systemic racism issue, I wondered if you had any thoughts to share about how sort of religion might provide, I wonder, a sort of a safety net and system for black people who might feel that the wider government and society doesn't have their best interests in mind, or along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've touched on that before, not just as a safety net and a lovely blanket. It's that sense that Zora Neale Hurston describes from her own transition away from faith, that sense of being connected to the divine, the inevitable, basically omnipotence. Even though, as she says, it's a creature of one's own creation, but wretched as that is, that's better than, or easier rather, than going out and facing the slings and arrows of white supremacy and institutionalized racism every single day. So in that sense, it is the gift that keeps on giving, but it's poisonous, and I believe we perish through it.
Is it me now? Yes. I just wanted to ask if you would spell out and repeat the name of that young Nigerian who you said was challenging religious people all over and is very funny. Because I'd like to follow him.
Please do. If everyone can follow Benga Adwoyin, and it's spelled Gbenga, Benga Adwoyin, Adewoyin. And as I said, he does actually speak necessarily in fairly broad pidgin, but if you can understand Geordie, you'll be able to understand that. But he does speak in very, very broad pidgin necessarily because he's reaching as wide an audience as he can.
Is he on Facebook and
Facebook, I'm not
YouTube
sure.
And stuff?
Facebook, I'm not sure. He could be, but YouTube definitely. And his MO is to go from basically to offer challenges to all of these fraudulent pastors who are regrowing limbs and people who can resist bullets and all of this nonsense which is bound up into the faith systems. And he's doing a great job of it because, as I said, he is A, very brave, A, very funny, and he keeps it demotic. Everyone can understand what's happening when he's around. And he's also, his life is under a death sentence, a free-floating death sentence as well.
Okay, so I think we've probably got time for one or two more. I know you've had your hand up for some time. And then perhaps afterwards there was another one just back there as well, if the mic can head there.
Going back to Africa, and it kind of feeds back into the Ugandan thing, do you think that there is a lot of influence from white evangelical Christianity trying to open up another front?
Yes. This is the short answer. And there's been unbelievable damage which is being done by those elements throughout the continent because, of course, as congregations shrink in North America, not as much as here, but as congregations do shrink in North America, here is an entire continent, many of whom are Christians, who are looking for these forms of faith which evangelicals can supply. They promise miracles to people who are one meal maybe from eternity. They promise status. One will be at the right hand of God. You'll be anointed. You'll be blessed and living abundantly. They also promise, a form of worship, which is very invigorating, very lively, and again, communal. So it's a huge source of income for them, and political power as well, because they can sidestep other church authorities. And I think the same thing is happening in Uganda as is happening in Nigeria, where the authority which will be invoked won't be the Church of England, which is now like persona non grata in many of those conversations in Africa. It won't be the Church of England, but it will be an evangelical assembly or some other, or even a local Anglican church which will share and accelerate their views.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for just one more, but hopefully this is a conversation that we'll be able to continue throughout the day. So if we got one right at the back there, and sorry if we didn't get to you, hopefully you can speak to Steve afterwards and indeed each other. So right at the back there. Oh, yeah. Oh no, oh sorry, this is so high pressure, isn't it?
We need a description.
Yeah, standing up, yeah.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask your understanding on black apostasy. Whether the story of black humanism is also a story of black apostasy. Yeah. What do we know about black apostasy, basically? I run services for apostates.
Mm-hmm.
Our service users are quite diverse in terms of age, we're equal in gender, diverse in terms of sexuality, and diverse in terms of race. Other than I would expect to see more black people than we do. Yeah. And I think it's something we're doing or not doing that is the reason for why we don't see as many black people. And so if you have any advice on what we could or couldn't be doing, that would be useful.
Yeah, okay. So with apostasy, it depends, it varies according to the faith group. If you're talking about black Muslims who lose their faith, it's unlikely you'll be seeing them because they won't be hanging around. They're probably left the country to pastures new. Black Christians, certainly amongst both the the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the Seventh-day Adventists, there are massive penalties to pay for those who have grown up excluded from other parts of society in those hermetically sealed shouting parlors. And there is a very high degree of, I've got to say, mental illness as well from people who leave those communities and try and integrate into the general population. Their tools aren't there, their responses aren't on point. But in terms of offering your services as a humanist organization, it just needs outreach. There just need to be organizations which you will pinpoint and just let people know we are here, we offer these services, and also that you will understand what they are going through, because you probably have people who have made that same journey, that same exit. So there is a life on the other side. Because there's a huge ignorance about humanism, even though, am I correct in assuming that, without wanting to embarrass you, that you have made that journey yourself?
Yes, yeah, ex-Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, so I think you might imagine or understand that there just isn't that emotion which is available for an individual, who's just leaving the house, sliding down the drain pipe with their knapsack on their back. This material has to be actually targeted to young people. I hate going back to the digital world, but that's where a lot of them live and have their being. So that needs to be a place where they can see it, as well as places which are popular and known to them. So basically, you can't afford to be a stranger, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for your excellent questions.